"Ma'am, I think you're a little lost. The family viewing area is back behind the main tower." The voice belonged to a young corporal, his chest puffed out with the unshakable certainty of a man who had held a position of minor authority for precisely 6 months. His name tape read, Hicks. He had a square jaw, a fresh haircut, and a smile that was meant to be helpful but landed squarely on patronizing. Marjorie didn't turn her head. She kept her gaze downrange, watching the heat shimmer rise from the dirt berms. "I'm exactly where I need to be, Corporal." Her voice was quiet, the words measured. It was a voice that didn't need volume to command attention, but Corporal Hicks was not attuned to its frequency. His smile tightened. "Look, I get it. You're here to see your grandson shoot and you want a closer look. It's great you're supportive, but this area is for active personnel only. Safety regulations." He gestured vaguely with a clipboard, as if it were a scepter. "I'm aware of the regulations," Marjorie said, finally turning to face him. She held up her Department of Defense identification card. It was the simple white card issued to retirees, its corners softened from years in a wallet. "Retired, Master Gunnery Sergeant." Hicks glanced at the card, his eyes barely registering the rank before flicking back to her face, her gray hair, her red jacket. The cognitive dissonance was too much for him. A Master Gunnery Sergeant, this gentle-looking grandmother. The two images didn't compute in his world, a world where authority was loud, muscular, and male. "Right, a retiree," he said, drawing the word out. "Well, that's great, Master Gunnery Sergeant, but on my range, we have rules, and frankly, your attire is a distraction, and we can't have anyone this close to the line who isn't actively participating or coaching." He leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Between you and me, the noise can be a little disorienting if you're not used to it anymore. Wouldn't want you to get startled." A few of the recruits on a water break had noticed the interaction. They nudged each other, smirking. An old lady in a fancy red coat being told off by Hicks. It was the most interesting thing that had happened all morning. Marjorie's posture remained relaxed, but an invisible switch had been flipped. The quiet observer was gone. In her place was something else, something ancient and immovable. "Corporal," she said, her voice still even, "are you questioning the validity of my identification?" "No, ma'am, I'm just ensuring the safety of my range." He was backpedaling but couldn't stop himself from digging the hole deeper. "It's just an unusual situation. We don't get many of you ladies from your generation out here. Things have changed. The new optics, the rate of fire, the qualification standards are much higher now." He was trying to explain the modern Marine Corps to her. It was almost charming in its profound ignorance. Marjorie's gaze dropped to the rifle slung over his shoulder. An M16A4 with a Trigicon ACOG mounted on the carrying handle. It was a fine weapon. She had taught a whole generation of instructors how to use them effectively at distances their designers never dreamed of. "The standards are the standards, Corporal," she said. "They've always been high." Hicks was losing patience. The recruits were watching, and this old woman was making him look foolish by simply refusing to be dismissed. He snatched her ID card from her hand for a closer look. "Lane, Marjorie," he read aloud, a little too loudly. He squinted at the photo, then back at her. "This thing is pretty old. The laminate is peeling. I'm going to need to run this by the Rangemaster just to verify it's still valid." It was a blatant power play, a challenge. He was treating her like a potential fraud, banking on her being intimidated by the process, by the inconvenience. He wanted her to huff, get flustered, and retreat to the family viewing area where she belonged. Marjorie simply waited. Her hands, weathered and strong, rested at her sides. Her thumb brushed against a small, worn leather pouch on her belt, a nervous habit she'd never quite broken. It was a simple, hand-stitched case, dark with age and oil, just big enough to hold her ear protection. To Hicks, it probably looked like a coin purse. The pouch was more than 30 years old. She could still feel the phantom weight of what it used to hold, not earplugs, but a small, spiral-bound notebook and a set of wind charts. She saw a flash of a different place, a different time, a younger version of herself, face smeared with camouflage paint, lying on a rooftop overlooking a dusty street. The sun was a hammer. The air tasted of sand and fear. She was pulling that same notebook from that same leather pouch, her fingers scribbling frantic calculations. Wind speed, humidity, spin drift, angle of declination, a voice in her ear crackling over the radio. "Ghost, you have the shot. Take the shot." That pouch had been her lifeline, the repository of the cold, hard math that separated life from death. "What's in the purse, Grandma?" One of the recruits snickered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Knitting needles?" Hicks shot the recruit a warning look, but he was secretly pleased. The tide of opinion was with him. Marjorie ignored them all. She met the corporal's gaze, her blue eyes like chips of ice. You do what you think you have to do, Corporal. Her calmness was more unnerving than any outburst would have been. It pricked at his ego. He felt a surge of frustration, a need to definitively win this encounter. Fine. You wait right here. Don't move, he commanded, and stalked off toward the main control tower, her ID card held between his thumb and forefinger like a piece of garbage. As Hicks walked away, another figure detached himself from the shadows of the tower's overhang. Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole, the Rangemaster. He was a bull of a man with a graying flat top and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He'd been watching the entire exchange through his binoculars, a deep sense of unease growing in his gut. He hadn't been able to hear the words, but he saw the corporal's aggressive posture and the old woman's unshakable stillness. He saw Hicks snatch her ID. Something about her name, when Hicks had read it aloud, had snagged in his memory. Lane. Marjorie Lane. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. A ghost of a memory from his early days as a lance corporal, listening to salty old gunnery sergeants tell stories that sounded more like myths. Stories about a shooter who didn't officially exist, who operated in the shadows long before the rules changed. A call sign ghost. Cole ambled over, his expression unreadable. Having some trouble, ma'am? Your corporal is verifying my credentials, Marjorie said, her voice betraying no emotion. Cole nodded slowly. Corporal Hicks is enthusiastic. He extended a hand. Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole, I run this place. Marjorie Lane, she replied, shaking his hand. Her grip was firm, her knuckles hard. It was not the hand of a sheltered grandmother. Lane, Cole repeated, rolling the name over in his mind. Then it hit him, a jolt like a misfire. He looked from her calm, aged face to the worn leather pouch on her belt. He'd seen a pouch exactly like that once before, on the hip of a legendary instructor at the Scout Sniper School in Quantico, a man who claimed it was a gift from the best shooter he'd ever known. An instructor who always referred to this mythical shooter as she. Cole's blood ran cold. It couldn't be. Ma'am, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Did you ever serve with the 1st Reconnaissance Battalion? Back in the early 90s? A flicker of something, nostalgia maybe, or sorrow passed through Marjorie's eyes. I was attached to them for a time. That was all the confirmation he needed. Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole felt a wave of nausea. He looked over at the tower where Hicks was no doubt making a fool of himself and the entire Marine Corps over the radio. Oh, sweet mother of God, he breathed. He pulled his own radio from his belt, turning his back to Marjorie to give himself a semblance of privacy. He didn't call the base duty officer. He didn't call the provost marshal. He keyed a number into his personal cell phone, one he hadn't used in years. It was a direct line to the aid of a man who was on this very base for a retirement parade. A man who owed his life, and the lives of his team, to a ghost he'd only ever heard over a radio. This is Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole at Range 4, he said, his voice tight and urgent. Get me General Madsen, right now. It's an emergency. Tell him we found a ghost. Inside the Paris Island Command Building, Lieutenant Colonel Williams, aide-de-camp to Lieutenant General Madsen, frowned at his phone. An emergency at a recruit firing range, and a message that sounded like something out of a spy novel. Sir, he said, stepping into the general's temporary office, a Master Gunnery Sergeant from the rifle range is on the line. He insists on speaking with you. He said to tell you they've found a ghost. General Madsen looked up from his paperwork. He was a man in his late 50s, his face a roadmap of a long and difficult career. At the word ghost, he went utterly still. The pen in his hand froze over the page. There was only one person who that call sign could refer to, a person he hadn't seen or heard from in over 2 decades, a person he thought had vanished completely. Give me the phone, he said, his voice a low growl. The aide handed it over. The general listened for less than 30 seconds, his eyes widening in disbelief, then hardening with a cold fury. Cole, you keep her there, do not let her leave. And you keep that corporal away from her. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at his aide. Get my vehicle, now. Alert the base commander, we're heading to Range 4, Code 1. And pull up the service record for a Master Gunnery Sergeant Marjorie Lane, retired. The aide scrambled, fingers flying across his keyboard. A moment later, a file appeared on the screen. It was heavily redacted. Large sections were blacked out, labeled classified eyes only. But what was visible was staggering. Instructor billets at every advanced marksmanship school in the military. Commendations for valor from operations that, according to official histories, had no female personnel involved. A list of deployments to hotspots across the globe spanning from the late 80s to the early 2000s. She had been one of the first, a pioneer who had operated in the dark, her accomplishments buried in sealed files to avoid political fallout. She hadn't just broken barriers, she had acted as if they didn't exist, her sheer competence forcing the system to look the other way. "My God, sir," the aide whispered. She was a legend." "She still is," Madsen said, grabbing his cover from the desk. "And some damn fool corporal is about to find that out the hard way." Back on the range, Corporal Hicks was striding back from the tower, a smug, triumphant look on his face. He'd spoken to some clerk at the admin building who had no idea who Marjorie Lane was, and had confirmed that yes, the ID was old, and he was within his rights to require further verification at the main gate. The small victory had inflated his ego to dangerous proportions. He saw the Rangemaster, Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole, standing near the old woman, and his swagger increased. He'd show the old-timer how a modern NCO handled things. "All right, ma'am," he announced, stopping in front of Marjorie. "As I thought, your credentials can't be verified here on the range. You're going to have to come with me to the main gate to get this sorted out. If it turns out this ID is fraudulent, that's a federal offense." He crossed his arms, puffing out his chest. "Frankly, I think you've been wasting my time. You probably can't even see the 500-yard line from here, let alone hit it. Your memory of how to handle one of these is probably as faded as that ID card." The surrounding recruits, sensing the climax of the drama, had gathered in a loose semicircle. They were young, impressionable, and Hicks's confidence was infectious. One of them, emboldened, called out, "Yeah, bet she couldn't hit the berm." Hicks shot the recruit a grin. The challenge hung in the air, thick and greasy. He looked Marjorie up and down, from her sensible shoes to her red jacket to her silver hair. He saw weakness. He saw a target for his own insecurity. "You know what?" he said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "I'll make you a deal. You want to stay so bad. You think you still got it. Fine." He unslung his M16 and held it out to her. "Pick it up. Let's see what you've got, Grandma. There's a full rack of targets up at the 500. Dare you to take the shot. You hit one, just one, and I'll apologize and leave you be." Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole took a step forward, his face turning purple. "Corporal, that is enough. Stand down right now." But it was too late. A hush had fallen over the range. The challenge had been issued. Marjorie looked at the rifle, then at the corporal's arrogant face. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed her features, a profound weariness mixed with a spark of the old fire. She had spent a lifetime proving herself, fighting against men just like this one, men who saw her gender and her age before they ever saw her skill. She was so tired of the fight. But the Marine in her, the part that never retired, could not abide a challenge unanswered. Just as she reached for the rifle, the sound of tires screeching on gravel cut through the tension. Two black government SUVs, flags mounted on their front fenders, fishtailed to a halt just behind the firing line. Dust billowed out from under their wheels. The doors flew open. Out of the first vehicle stepped the base commander, a full colonel, his face a mask of alarm. Out of the second stepped a man who made the colonel look like a recruit. 3 stars glittered on his collar. Lieutenant General Madsen. He moved with a speed and purpose that belied his age, his eyes scanning the crowd and locking onto the woman in the red tweed jacket. The recruits, seeing the stars, snapped to attention so fast it was audible. Corporal Hicks froze, his jaw slack, the rifle still held out in his hands. He felt a cold dread wash over him, the kind that signals a catastrophic, career-altering mistake. General Madsen strode past the saluting colonel without a glance. He walked past the terrified Corporal Hicks. He walked right up to Marjorie Lane, the crowd of young Marines parting before him like the Red Sea. He stopped 2 feet in front of her, his boots planted firmly in the dirt. And then, in the stunned silence of Range 4, the 3-star general raised his hand to his brow and rendered a crisp, perfect salute to the old woman in the red tweed jacket. "Ghost," General Madsen said, his voice thick with emotion and 3 decades of memory. "It's been too long." Marjorie's posture softened for a fraction of a second. A genuine, weary smile touched her lips. She returned the salute, her movements economical and precise. "Hello, Eric. You're looking well." The general dropped his salute and gestured with his chin toward the slack-jawed Corporal Hicks. "I see you've met the welcoming committee. I trust they've been professional." His voice was dangerously soft, a razor's edge wrapped in velvet. The crowd of recruits held their breath. They were witnessing something far outside their understanding. A 3-star general saluting an old woman, calling her ghost. They looked at Marjorie now not with derision, but with a dawning, terrifying sense of awe. They were standing in the presence of something they couldn't define, a living piece of history they had just been mocking. General Madsen turned his attention to the assembled Marines, his eyes sweeping over the young, confused faces until they landed on Corporal Hicks. "This," he began, his voice now booming across the silent range, "is Master Gunnery Sergeant retired Marjorie Lane. And for those of you who have never had the privilege of reading her real unredacted file, allow me to enlighten you. He took a step closer to the recruits, his gaze burning with intensity. This woman was a scout sniper instructor before most of your parents had even met. She wrote half the doctrine on high-angle shooting and cold-bore shots that you recruits are still failing to master today. The last time I saw her hold a rifle was in a dusty corner of Fallujah, a place the history books will tell you women never served. She used a borrowed M40A3 rifle and a single round to make an 1,100-meter shot in a sandstorm to save 3 members of my recon team who were pinned down and about to be overrun. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. She did it while she was wounded. She did it when men twice her size had failed. She did it because that is who she is. She is a United States Marine, and she is a living legend. A legend that this corporal, he spat the word like a curse, dared to disrespect. He turned back to Hicks, who looked as if he might faint. You dared her to take the shot. Is that right, Corporal? Hicks could only manage a choked, squeaking sound. Marjorie stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on the general's arm. Eric, it's all right. She then looked at Corporal Hicks, her eyes not angry but appraising. She took the M16 from his nerveless grasp. The weapon felt familiar, an extension of her own body. She turned to the recruits. He challenged me. A challenge was issued. It has to be answered. Without another word, she walked to the firing line. She didn't bother with a sling or a shooting mat. She simply dropped to one knee, the movement fluid and practiced. The red tweed jacket seemed absurdly out of place, yet she wore it with the same natural authority as a field-worn uniform. She settled the buttstock into the pocket of her shoulder. Her left hand supported the rifle, her right curled around the pistol grip. Her finger rested alongside the trigger guard. She took one deep, slow breath. The world seemed to narrow. The chattering recruits, the furious general, the terrified corporal, all of it faded away. There was only her, the rifle, the air between them, and the distant black shape of the target, 500 yards away. Then, the range came alive with a new rhythm. Crack. A puff of dust erupted from the very center of the target's head. Crack. A second hole appeared, touching the first. She shifted her aim to the next target over. Crack. Crack. 2 more shots. A perfect double tap in the bullseye. She moved down the line, a machine of perfect economical motion. Crack, crack, crack. She wasn't just hitting the targets, she was destroying them, placing each shot with surgical, contemptuous ease. She fired 10 rounds in less than 15 seconds, 10 targets, 10 dead center hits. She did it all without a flinch, without a wasted breath. The recruits watched, mesmerized. This wasn't qualification shooting, this was artistry. This was a master at work. When the magazine was empty, the bolt locked to the rear with a metallic click that sounded deafening in the renewed silence. Marjorie Lane rose to her feet, the scent of cordite clinging to her red jacket. She cleared the weapon with practiced efficiency and handed it back to the petrified Corporal Hicks. She looked at him, then at the wide-eyed recruits. Don't soften standards, she said, her voice carrying across the now still air. Apply them fairly, to everyone, regardless of what they look like or how old you think they are. Experience doesn't expire with youth. Gray hair doesn't mean you've gone soft. It means you've survived things that broke other people. General Madsen stepped forward. His rage had subsided, replaced by a quiet, profound respect. He looked at Hicks, his expression one of deep disappointment. Corporal, you failed to see the Marine. You saw a woman. You saw her age. You saw a civilian jacket. You failed to see the Master Gunnery Sergeant standing right in front of you. You are a disgrace to the uniform of a non-commissioned officer. Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole will see to your remedial education. He then turned back to Marjorie, his expression softening. He gently touched the small leather pouch on her belt. You still carry it. For the first time, the audience saw the pouch for what it was, a brief, almost subliminal flash of memory, not just Marjorie's but the General's too. A dusty rooftop, the whistle of an incoming RPG, a younger Marjorie, grim-faced, pulling a small, battered notebook from that very pouch, making one last desperate calculation before squeezing the trigger and saving them all. The pouch wasn't a coin purse. It was a holy relic. The fallout for Corporal Hicks was swift but not what he expected. He was not discharged. Marjorie, in a quiet word with the General, had asked for leniency. Instead, Hicks spent the next 6 months in a special duty assignment. His job was to research and present a weekly history lesson to every new platoon of recruits. The topic was always the same: the history of women in the Marine Corps, focusing on the unofficial, unacknowledged pioneers who served in combat roles long before the laws officially changed. He became the base's foremost expert on the subject. Weeks later, Marjorie was at the base exchange picking up a few things before a long drive home. She felt a presence behind her and turned to see Corporal Hicks standing there, his cover in his hands. He looked thinner, humbled. "Ma'am," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "Master Gunnery Sergeant. I wanted to apologize properly. There's no excuse for my behavior. I was arrogant, and I was wrong. I'm sorry." Marjorie studied him for a long moment. She saw the genuine remorse in his eyes. She smiled, a small, kind expression. "I accept your apology, Corporal." She picked up 2 coffees from the counter and handed one to him. "Walk with me." They walked out into the afternoon sun. "You learn anything from your new duties?" she asked. "More than I ever learned on the range, ma'am," he said earnestly. "I've been reading about women I never knew existed, women who did things I don't think I could do. I was ignorant." "We're all ignorant about something, Corporal," Marjorie said, taking a sip of her coffee. "The important thing is to be willing to learn. Let me give you one last piece of advice, something that will serve you well your entire career." He looked at her, ready to receive some profound marksmanship secret. "Never ever," she said, her blue eyes twinkling, "assume you're the most dangerous person in the room." He nodded, the lesson landing with the force of a 175-grain boat-tail projectile. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. A month later, a new standing order was posted on every bulletin board at Paris Island, detailing new protocols for interacting with retired personnel, with a special emphasis on avoiding assumptions based on age or gender. And that year, for the first time, the depot's top marksmanship award given to the recruit with the highest rifle score was renamed. It was now the Master Gunnery Sergeant Marjorie Ghost Lane Marksmanship Trophy. It was open to everyone. Thank you for watching. To honor the legacy of pioneers like Marjorie, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to She Chose Valor for more stories of the incredible women who have served our nation.